JoJo Domann going to make this football team? Seems to be a training camp standout so far. Drew Ogletree just every single other day keeps having these one-handed highlight reels. We'll talk about that and so much more. And to do that, I brought George Bremer on, Colts beat writer, Herald Bulletin. And actually, I wanted to make sure we look this up. New podcast coming out very soon, The Blue Horseshoe. Guys, if you have a chance, go ahead. I've already subscribed. It's right here, man. Go ahead and just click on it. We're good to go. How you doing this morning, GB?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Zach, for subscribing. I know I got at least one listener now, so hey,
yeah.
That should be a lot of fun. Ryan Hickey with CBS Radio is going to be on there with me, and I think it's going to be really unique. It should be a lot of fun. And again, we're heading into a season that I think is going to be a really interesting year. There's a lot on the line for this football team. Everybody understands the expectations, especially coming off that loss last season. I think there's going to be no shortage of storylines as this season unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about that. And, as we talked about in the intro, JoJo Domann is had a really good camp. You've been down there, I think, pretty much every single day, George. What has impressed you the most about him as far as, just what he's been doing on the field? And it looks like he's got an actual viable shot to make this football team at this point.
Yeah, consistency. I mean, that's what you're looking for with every player out there. If they flash one day, you wait and you see, are they going to disappear for a week? You know how it goes. And with him, it's been, especially since the pads came on, every day there's something. He's either, flying in and making a big hit. He's getting a turnover. He's just getting his hands on a ball and making it tough on the offense in some way or shape or form. And he's a guy who's doing a little bit of everything. He's been out before practices, long snapping. Not that Luke Rhodes' job is in jeopardy. It's just one of those, the more you can do, you're in a situation, I think it was it last year or the year before, they lost Luke Rhodes for a game, you never know what's going to happen. Who's your backup long snapper? You try to have as many of those around as you can. This is a guy who's literally willing to do anything. I think he's got a great shot at that Jordan Glasgow role on this roster coming in and being a four-course special teams guy. And then, I think he's got upside as a defender. He's not the most freakish athletic guy out there, but he's got instincts, which are clear. He's got a nose for the ball, which is huge, and especially in this defense. And he's not afraid to get physical. In fact, I think yesterday – they were in shells and he got a little too rough and they kind of pulled him to the side for a minute and said, hey, wait a minute, was 4 straight days in pads, but not today. Let's slow it down a little bit. And I think, deep down, the coaches kind of like that. when they have to slow you down, they're probably pretty happy.
Exactly. That's almost a welcome sight, in training camp where everybody's been we've been a little too relaxed in the years past. I feel like, George, this year, we had Kevin Bowen on the podcast Tuesday, and he mentioned something that I thought was really cool. 21 of 22 starters have been out there really for every single practice. Like, that's just not happened under the Frank Reich era so far, right? Something's different, and you always want to just try to draw parallels to certain things, but it's true. Something's different this year in camp, George. I mean, it just is.
Even guys that get injuries are not staying out as long. I mean, for whatever reason, a lot of guys are back within a day or two if they do get banged up. We haven't seen the veteran rest days that have been there in the past. Now, the camp schedule's changed significantly, and I don't know how much of that plays into it. They generally, if they have a day off, they have a walkthrough the next day instead of a short practice to kind of ramp back into things. Like this week's a perfect example. Their last practice day before the game was Thursday. They're off Friday. They're going to play the game Saturday. They're off Sunday. Monday is going to be a walkthrough. They won't be back on the field for any kind of full practice until Tuesday. I think you're just giving guys a lot more time to recover. The time has changed. It used to be really early in the morning. Well, not really early, but like 10-ish. Now it's noon. Which is closer to when you play during the regular season. I mean, most of your games are going to be at 1 o'clock, obviously. I think it helps with that body clock. There's any number of things going on. But no, I mean, especially when you compare it to last year when it was, I think, 21 to 22 starters out for some portion of camp. It felt like it, at least. And everybody knows the one guy who's out, Shaquille Leonard, and I think he's not in any pain right now. He's not in, rehab mode anymore. He's just regaining strength to get to where they feel comfortable that he's not going to re-injure anything, and then he'll be ready to go as well.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how that kind of plays out. I think the rules have changed, George, where if you start the season on PUP, you only have to miss 4 games. You don't have to miss the 6 games. So maybe that's something to kind of keep an eye on as the season goes. So, George, I haven't had a chance to ask you on any of our podcasts. Are you for or against playing some of the starters? Because I'm for it. I've been very, very, adamant. Football is injuries are the worst part about football, right? Like you just hate that. But that being said, you feel like you got to get those guys out there and play a little bit and just get used to that contact as far as that goes. So, long-winded question, but are you for or against it?
I think it depends on the situation. I'm for it this year because there's so many new pieces, especially on offense. The defense is learning a new system, so you want to get them out there and get them a few reps and let them just see it live instead of, what they get to see in training camp, which is close, but it's not, there's steps during the NFL season. Everything's a little different. OTAs and then training camp's a whole new ball game. The preseason games are a whole new ball game, and then the regular season. So, I think it's good to get the defense out there a little bit in this scheme. Let them see an offense where they don't know the play that's coming. Let them run around a little bit, get their legs under them. And this offense, I mean, when you've got a brand new quarterback, you've seen the last couple of years, the slow starts, I think in part are due to the fact that in 2020, there was no spring at all.
Yeah.
Your training camp it was very different. It was limited in terms of what they could do, and you were not really around each other except for on the field, and it was a totally different situation. And Philip Rivers struggled early in the year. Probably talked that Cleveland game until he really looked like he was comfortable and felt like he could command this offense the way he wanted to. Last year, Carson Wentz got hurt. There was only 2 weeks in spring. They didn't do anything near what they've done this year in the spring. And then second day of practice, yeah. Carson Wentz broke his foot, pretty much missed the rest of training camp, didn't take a preseason snap, didn't take any of the snaps against the Panthers when they were here, and another slow start. I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm not saying that every player I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers is going to get off to a slow start because he doesn't play in Green Bay. Yeah. But when you've got a new quarterback like they have the last 2 years, I think it's nice to get him out there, get him with the team, let them hear him in the huddle, let him get to the line of scrimmage. Matt Ryan's not going to play a crazy amount on Saturday. It's probably going to be a quarter. Could be less than that. Honestly, if they go out and say get the opening kickoff and march on 15 plays to the end zone, he's probably done. It's going to be more about that kind of thing. But if they go 3 and out back to back and there's still time left in the quarter, he'll probably get a third series. So, it's really just going to depend on how much time the offense is on the field more than anything else. But in these kind of situations, I would favor it for those reasons.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I am so for it. And hindsight's 2020. There's always probably going to be something that happens in the preseason. You look back and you say, oh my gosh, see if they would have just not played them. But that's football, man. I mean, you just got to deal with some of those unfortunate things. Wanted to take a quick second. Can't put up there. He saw an Alec Pierce comp to Chris Godwin. Yeesh. If he turns out to be Chris Godwin, we got something, man. I mean, we got something here. High hopes for Alec Pierce. I might be a little hesitant on that at this point, but definitely has had a pretty solid camp. And then fourth in Flex Fantasy Podcast, he thinks they should only play a few series. Injuries have been insane lately, so we'll see. Wanted to talk about Drew Ogletree as well, man. Like this guy, every year in training camp, you've got a guy or two that comes out and, we call them training camp superstars, right? And then they do all of this and then they don't get a chance to really do anything when it comes to actual games. But when I see a guy, George, making plays in multiple practices, doing it in a variety of different ways, my antennas start going up a little bit. I start thinking, okay, now, like, this guy didn't just have a lucky catch, in a practice, and now we've talked about this for 3 weeks, this one catch. This guy seems to be doing something on a pretty regular basis at this point, which also tells me that Matt Ryan is starting to trust in him when he's throwing these footballs to him and just kind of letting him high point it, using a hand to grab it down. Just your thoughts on Drew Ogletree as you've been down there on the sidelines for most of camp, watching him live and in person.
I think the touchdown catch he had early in pads, it might have been the second day in pads, second or third day in pads. He went up in the end zone. He made a one-handed grab, and it seemed like if Matt Ryan had any questions about him, they were answered there. And I think since then it's just been straight up for this kid. It'll be interesting to see going forward. Obviously, he's still got work to do. He's got to go prove it on Saturday in Buffalo for one. That's where it starts. But I think he's one of those guys that you really pay attention to because he started flashing with the reserves, with Nick Foles and with Sam Ehlinger and Jack Combe. And you're like, okay, this is interesting. It doesn't look like a 6th round pick. He's out there and he's running around. He's making plays. Let's see where this is going. And they slowly started working him in with the ones, and he kept making plays. And when you can go from being guarded from the 3rd or 4th cornerback, 3rd or 4th string cornerback to being guarded at times by Stephon Gilmore and still making plays, you're feeling good. I mean, this defense has made – everybody knows the defense has made plays throughout this training camp. The secondary in particular, the linebackers have looked really good too. And, Drew Ogletree is one of the few receivers, I would say him and Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell, who have consistently in 11 on 11 gone out there and made plays every day against this defense. It's not an easy thing to do. Now, I think there's a couple things you want to see with him. One, does this carry over? Can he do it on Saturday? Can he do it throughout the preseason? And then obviously, can he do it September 11th in Houston? Yeah. But the other question is, I'm not sure where he's at on a blocking standpoint. He's a guy who played receiver almost his entire college career, wasn't a tight end until the very last year. So you would expect the receiving skill set to be a little ahead, and it is. But if he's going to have to show that he can be a factor opening holes for Jonathan Taylor, that he can be a factor when he needs to stay in and protect Matt Ryan, if he wants to be on the field often enough to make this impact during the regular season. And we'll see. I'm not by any stretch saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that's the next hurdle for him to clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be very interesting. We all know Frank Reich loves tight ends. So he'll get his chances, George. Harrison Woods says, good morning or afternoon from the UK. Hey, nice to have you in here, man. Difference who everyone is sleeping on in camp. I don't know if we're necessarily, I think at this point, Harrison, I think we've probably seen what we're going to see. Now it's game time, though. I think things will start standing out as in the game. One question I did want to ask you while we're on here, we all know that Ashton Doolin, Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman Jr., and Alec Pierce are going to probably make this football team. That 5th spot, is there anybody that you have your eye on, say a Kiki Coty or a Michael Young Jr., anybody like that you have your eye on that you say, hey, I want to see something from this guy that flashes, that lets me know, hey, that 5th spot, which is definitely up for grabs over these next 3 preseason games. Yeah. Anybody you're looking at?
Yeah, and Kiki Coty is right at the top of that list because there was a day about 2 days ago where Paris Campbell didn't really practice. He was out there. It was a weird day. He was out there in full pads, and apparently he felt something in his hamstring, a twinge, a tweak, whatever you want to call it. It must have happened in warm-ups because he came out prepared to go. He was out there the entire day. They never took him to the medical tent, at least that I saw. He never went back in, but he just didn't participate in anything after like individual work. So that day, QT was working with the 1s and the 2s. He was really getting double reps. And he made a couple splash plays. He had a one-handed catch in the end zone, was really the only touchdown they scored in the red zone in that period. And he made a couple plays underneath, running Paris Campbell routes. And I think he's a guy that, because we know what Paris Campbell's history is, everybody's well aware of that. I think he's a guy that, one of the few guys on the roster, you feel like you can slot into that role if Paris isn't available for a week. And at least have him run those routes and make some plays. He's not Paris Campbell, but he's done it in the league before. Obviously, he's done it in Lucas Oil Stadium before. He's going to be an interesting guy to keep an eye. He didn't really get a lot of playing time last year. I think he was inactive most of the year. He might have had one catch. I got to look that up. It wasn't a lot. He wasn't really up very often. But he's a veteran guy. This is a really young group. And he's another guy, for the most part, has had a pretty good camp. I think he's been pretty solid. And that depth at the receiver spot, if there was one thing that I would really complain about from training camp, that's it. I mean, there's the 4 guys you mentioned, and then not a lot of other guys consistently coming out doing it every day. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in games. But yeah, for me, Keke Coutee is right there at the top of all this watch.
Fun fact about Keke Coutee, his best 2 games in the NFL have been against the Indianapolis Colts. Unbelievable. I mean, I was there live, George, when that happened. I was looking to my left and looking to my right thinking, is this real right now? This guy's going over 100 yards. He lit us up that year. A lot of potential. And you brought up a really good fact, point. Maybe he's Paris Campbell insurance, right? Like we just don't have a lot. I think the one thing I'm struggling with a little bit, and I know and Nyheim Hines has been brought up in this role, what are you going to do when it's 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 5, and you need that receiver who can run those real integral routes? Like we've got so many guys who can play bully ball, throw it up and catch it, run all the way down the field, and we'll catch you on a deep bomb. But when we're talking about the technical ins and outs, and we're talking about the Jack Doyle routes, when I need this much space to catch a football and keep those chains moving, I don't know who that guy is, George. For all that Nyheim Hines can do, you don't want linebackers blowing this guy up all season long. He's just not built that. He's not that type of a slot guy. I'm interested in who could do that, who could fill that role. But more importantly, I think that's probably, to me, why I am probably a little bit pro bringing in a veteran wide receiver just to fill that spot and give him a security blanket. Now, I know you've got your tight ends. There's no doubt about that. But I also don't see that type of route running from our tight ends either. So definitely avoid. What about you? What say you when it comes to bringing in a veteran body, maybe after we have an evaluation against the Bills this Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it's got to be in consideration. They have to still be talking about it. I mean, they've been talking about it throughout the offseason. And like I said, those top 4 receivers have done their job. They look like they've all earned their role. They all have very specific roles on this team. But they do kind of need that glue guy to bring it all together. I think you'd feel better if Jack Doyle was still here, with him retiring. I know he's not a receiver, but like you said, there's things that he did in the passing game. It was really that third down security blanket for a lot of quarterbacks here over the years. You need somebody like that, Obviously, T.Y.'s name's going to come up. And obviously, T.Y. is going to be a guy who could fit that very well. It'll be interesting to see. I think you want to give these guys a fair shake, and I think that's happening. They've had, almost 3 weeks in training camp now. They're going to have at least one preseason game. We'll see. A guy like T.Y. Hilton, the good thing with all that, he's not going to need much time. You can bring him in. You could probably bring him in after the 3rd preseason game. He'd be ready to go. In all honesty, there's 2 weeks now between that and the start of the regular season. And, I'm sure at this point he wouldn't mind missing all of training camp either. So he's done that enough over it. So we'll see. I'm not saying he is coming in, but it has to still be a big consideration. And honestly, the last couple of times it came up, Chris Ballard brought it up. We didn't ask about it. He brought it up to say that T.Y. was still, in talks. So I'll say that. I haven't seen anything from training camp so far that makes me feel like they should take that off the table.
Yeah. So, and George, we had a video about T.Y. Hilton, and I mentioned in that video, I think back to 3rd grade Miss Baker using my context clues, right? Like in T.Y., I think about all of these situations and all of these scenarios. T.Y. probably could have signed with another team at this point. And Chris Ballard has never just vehemently shut the door on that. He said, we've been in talks, we've remained in contact, we will remain in contact. Never shut the door on that. You almost feel like in a sense that there's a little something going on behind the scenes that probably we're not privileged to know about those conversations. And based on how we play against the Bills and based on how that wide receiver room plays, I think that's going to be a real telltale key indicator if we would want to go ahead and move forward with a T.Y. Hilton. And he's perfect for the situation because he's not going to be a cancer in the locker room. He knows the locker room, and I think he knows who he is at this point in his career. Like, would he love to go out on the field and compete and help this team win football games? Yes, but I think he's also okay with a lesser role. I think he's okay with that because he felt that when Reggie Wayne was there. He kind of took that torch, and giving him that opportunity to kind of pass that torch on to Michael Pittman Jr. And we'll just see. Let's see. Austin says, I'll pop him up real quick. He says, from my understanding, T.Y. was asking for a bit too much, and that's what he's currently worth. Don't know how much a guy who hasn't been signed can ask for, Austin. At this point, I would have to think veteran minimum, George. I would have to think that if it's going to happen, it would be something along the lines of a veteran minimum. What do you think, George?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. There's so many aspects of this situation that we just don't have a lot of answers for. But I do think part of it is T.Y. being comfortable with everything. It's hard after you play as long as he did to come in and take, significant pay cut, take a significant playing cut time and understand that, this is the role you're going to have. I don't know. I think a lot of it depends on what goes forward. And I think he's also a guy, if Paris Campbell goes down, if they have injuries somewhere else in this roster, who's going to be on that emergency list speed dial. But, yeah, I don't see him getting $10 million again. I don't think that's going to, be something that works for this team right now. So I don't know. I haven't heard specifically that that's what's going on. I just know that it wouldn't be surprising if you have a guy who's played 10 years, I think now in the league.
Yeah.
It's hard, to come in and he's not a diva. It's not a situation like that. Anybody in any job that they do, if you've been there for a decade and now they want to limit your role and limit your paycheck, he's probably going to take a minute. You're going to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll just see. I mean, it'll be fun to see how that plays out. And you mentioned a great point earlier when he hit back on and double back. He just doesn't need time. He knows this. He knows the system. It probably honestly is counterproductive. To go out there and let's keep a little extra tread on those tires if you decide to go that route. And I'm for bringing in just a veteran wide receiver. It doesn't have to be T.Y. Obviously, T.Y., he's the hot topic because he's played here for so long and done so well. Maybe down the road, we've mentioned OBJ. I think that's probably something that we revisit later down the road when he's a little bit healthier and he's ready to actually come out and compete because there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to that. Jeff asked a really good question. Any chance that Michael Strawn can stay with this team in some capacity? Here's what I would say. I think they're probably going to start him on some form of PUP IR to kind of stash him. Scares me to death to see him just go out there and be on that free agent first round of that waiver wire. George, where are you at when it comes to Michael Strawn?
Yeah, unless he's able to come back, at the end of training camp here, which is getting close, unless he's able to come back within the next couple of weeks, I think the best play is to just leave him on PUP. That's where he is right now. Like you said, that's only a 4-game absence right now. You've got a ramp-up period coming out of there that's built in. I think that's the easiest place to stash him. I agree. You probably don't want to just expose him right now to the waiver wire. His size and his speed and even the little bit of tape he put in the preseason last year is probably enough. Somebody's going to take a chance on him. It's hard, to just put him on the 53 as is. But I will say this. There aren't a whole bunch of guys who stepped up and clamored for a job in camp. So, if they keep 6 receivers, which they've done, it wouldn't be out of the question. I don't think it's the route they're going to go, but it wouldn't be, the most ridiculous thing I've seen if he was the number 6 receiver on gut down day. But I think, he's on PUP for a reason. You don't have to put guys on PUP this time of year. The only reason you do that is to reserve the right to put them on PUP to start the regular season. And so I think that's been in their mind all along.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said this, really no one was affected by an injury probably worse than this kid. I mean, he had this was a viable, honest chance for him to come out and carve out a role on this football team based on that momentum that he had from last year. Just a terrible, tough break for him. I just don't think the Colts are done with him yet, though. I think the Colts want to see a little bit more. Obviously, if we can get into the season and we can go down that road, and those waiver wires have always been, taken over. It's a lot less likely a guy gets claimed in season than it is on that first initial cut. There's a lot of movement, but those first 24, 48 hours. Before we hop off here, Is there anything in this Colts preseason game with the Bills that you're saying to yourself, like, I want to come away with this from this game? Like, I want to know about this particular position group or whatever it would be. We just don't have enough clarity, and I would like to have a little bit more clarity at that position group.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any group that I'm looking at, but I just want to see how Matt Pryor does, honestly, and Bernard Raymond for that matter. Pryor has looked pretty good. I think he's not an all-pro. He's not a Pro Bowler at that spot. He's not Anthony Costanzo, but he's doing his job. He's been a solid left tackle so far. He's gotten better, I think, every practice. In one-on-ones, he's starting to find a way to win some reps against Yannick Ngakoue, which is no easy task. I think that, his footwork looks good. He's obviously big, strong guy. He's been out there working with Quentin Nelson every day before practice. They go through a whole routine before stretch. I want to see what it looks like live. It's great to look good in training camp. Obviously, we talk about with receivers all the time. Linemen's probably even more important to get them out there in this kind of situation where, the quarterback's not wearing a red jersey, the running back's going to the ground on tackles. And let's see how Matt Pryor does. I think it's been real encouraging so far. I want to see how that first, trial run goes for him.
Absolutely. And I mean, they paid him $5.5 million for a reason. Like they believe that he has an opportunity to come out and win this job. And with Ryman, looks like that he's a little bit ahead on the pass rush, but the run blocking, his body's going to have to develop a little bit and just get a little bit stronger when he anchors down and he kind of takes on those bull rushers. Be very interesting to see how that plays out. I've got my eye on that cornerback position, Isaiah Rodgers, Brandon Faison. Looks like Faison clearly has the upper hand. He knows the Gus Bradley system, as well as he's a steady player, George. Like I think that's what he gives you. Rodgers gives you the flash, and I like a guy who can take the football away because that flips that field for you and gives your offense more chances to score. But that is really something that's going to be fun to watch. Guys, thank you so much. We did a short live stream here. Unfortunately, I got to go to work. I got to make some money today. So I really appreciate you guys getting up early, hopping on, throwing your questions. Austin, it was cool having you on, interacting. And we even had a guy from the UK. If you haven't already, join the family. All you got to do is hit subscribe, like, rate, review, and light us up in the comments. This chat is going to keep on going even after we get off this live stream. So you guys, this is for you. We always do the podcast for you guys, and we always appreciate when we get people like George that come on as well. Also, George, looking forward to the new podcast, and you'll be writing. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say after this Bills game as well. So thanks for hopping on, man, and we'll catch you around soon, okay?
No problem. Thanks a lot. Anytime.
Absolutely.